bring John into the conversation. He's got 10 observations on the Eagles, all 22. If you're an Eagle fan, it is must-read Wednesday morning QB. 10 thoughts on the Eagles-Steelers, all 22 tape from John McMullen at 97.3 ESPN.com. And you're taking a look back, John, at some of the things as that all 22 tape is released here. I want to start off, Malcolm Jenkins. He's a guy that I think if you didn't watch the tape, you probably said this guy stood out. But what really stood out about what both Jenkins and Rodney McLeod did, John, because I ask about the duo together because some people think that the Eagles might have the best safety tandem in the NFL.
It's up there through 3 games. There's no question about it. And Jim Schwartz kind of said he expected that dating back to the preseason. And I think Rodney McLeod is shaping up as one of the more underrated free agent signings. He's just got tremendous range on the back end. So it enables them to basically play interchangeable safeties, which is always a plus because you never know who's going to be in coverage. You never know who's going to be in the box, or obviously you can put both in cover 2 or cover 3 or something of that nature. So it gives Jim Schwartz a lot of options as far as putting some exotic stuff behind the 4-man front, because as we always say, he doesn't like to blitz all that much. And when he doesn't have to, you can see some of the success he had. But and Malcolm specifically, and remember, he's coming off a Pro Bowl season, so we've seen some really good play out of him over the last year or so, and that might have been his best coverage game ever. He was just off the charts as far as pass coverage against the Steelers, which is obviously a tremendous offense. Then you couple in the fact he did not play that well against Cleveland or Chicago, at least up to his standards. I'm not going to say he played poorly, but as far as up to the standard he set last season, he wasn't the same guy. All of a sudden, Pittsburgh shows up, and it was really, really good. And that's one of the best games you'll ever see coverage-wise from a safety.
Yeah, and we mentioned Rodney McLeod and Malcolm Jenkins, that duo there. A lot of people think they might be, as we said, the best tandem in the league. But the secondary as a whole, you throw Nolan Carroll, Jalen Mills, Ron Brooks into the mix there. And this has been a strong suit for this team where a lot of people thought it would be a weak spot. But Nolan Carroll is one guy that seems like really stood out. I was joking earlier. I said, this guy seemed like he was Deion Sanders on Sunday. He was everywhere.
Yeah, he was. It was a lot like Malcolm because he was the same way. He did not play that well in the first 2 games, and all of a sudden he shows up against the Steelers, and he looked like, you're right, he looked like a lockdown corner. And he's not. It was just one of those days where he had a tremendous game, and part of it is obviously Pittsburgh tried to pick on the rookie Jalen Mills as much as possible. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But, you know, as I said, we're nitpicking anytime you want to complain about something. When you stop the Steelers from getting in the end zone, there's not a lot to complain about. And as far as the coverage went, one of the reasons for that is because of Jenkins and Carroll, who really, really had stellar games.
All right, how about let's take a look at we're looking at the all-22 observations. John McMullen takes a look at that every Wednesday with the Wednesday Morning QB. Check that out on our website, 97.3ESPN.com. Fletcher Cox got the big deal on tape. Is he living up to it?
Yeah, he is. I don't think that's any surprise to anyone. We all kind of knew he was a top 10 defensive lineman in this league. I guess certain people worry that any time a player signs a big contract, they might get a little satiated, but anybody who knows Fletcher, that's not his nature. You knew he was going to give the same effort no matter what the paycheck said. And it standed out. He's proven that to be correct because he's still playing at a Pro Bowl level. And if you look at the Steelers and what they have on the offensive line, specifically Pouncey, DeCastro, the interior of that line is really, really good. And he dominated. And the interior push which is so important when you're talking about a pass rush, especially against a guy like Ben Roethlisberger, who understands how to move around and slide in the pocket and climb the pocket. He just has that innate feel for it. But once you get that push in the middle, you got nowhere to go if you're a quarterback. And that's a lot of what happened thanks to Fletcher Cox.
John McMullen's with us. Brandon Graham, I thought that Curry would be the guy that would really be the breakout player in this defense, but it's been Graham that has really dominated. And is he dominating because there's attention to others, or is he dominating because he's winning at the point of attack?
A little bit of both. You have to pay a ton of attention to Fletcher Cox, so that helps everybody up front. And there's no question about it, but the Steelers gave Brandon Graham a lot of attention, and that's because of the way he played the first 2 weeks. And they did a lot of chipping on him before they sent a running back or a tight end into a route. They would chip Brandon Graham because of how effective he's been. So he's already started to be noticed by offensive coordinators around the league, and they're starting to plan for him. So that tells you how good he's been performing. And I think you're right, Mike, if you go back to the offseason, I think the Eagles' plan, and it's not even think, it was their plan, was that Vinny Curry was going to be the starter and Brandon Graham would kind of mix in. But he's performed so well dating back to training camp. He pretty much lapped Vinny Curry, and now he's ahead of Connor Barwin as far as effectiveness. And all of a sudden, a guy they expected to be their third defensive end is their best defensive end, and their second best defensive lineman behind Fletcher Cox.
Yeah, he's been living up to that first-round pick. You remember, not only was a first-round pick, John, the Eagles traded up to get him. And, that move has been criticized for a couple of years because there was other guys right around him that they could have gotten, and he was not on their level. But right now he's lapping him. He's passing him. He might be playing at the highest level. And you see a guy like J.J. Watt out. Who knows at the end of the year what we're saying about Brandon Graham and his position and the job he's done. But he has been a huge factor in the Eagles' defense, giving up just 27 points this year. On offense, what you see from Carson Wentz on that tape?
I joked with Tim McManus yesterday when we were doing the show. I'm looking for holes, and I can't find any. I also joked about the hyperbole and Doug bringing up Peyton Manning and Brett Favre. I brought up Brett Favre. Baldy brought up Aaron Rodgers. And, obviously 3 games, you don't belong in a conversation with quarterbacks like that. But while I say that, for these 3 games, look, he's been off the charts. It's tough to explain because of the lack of experience, where he came from. Didn't have a lot of preseason work because of the injury. It's tough to explain, but right now he's playing lights out, and he's really been spectacular against the blitz, which doesn't make any sense for a rookie quarterback who typically struggle. The only thing you can point to is what people say about his work ethic and the fact that he's a film junkie and a gym rat, and he really, really does enjoy diving into that aspect of the preparation and the game plan. And once you're prepared and you know what's coming, obviously it's a lot easier for you. And I think that's what's going on with Carson Wentz, and obviously that's rare with rookie quarterbacks.
John, I want to play something for you. I have a conversation coming up with Amani Toomer at 5:30, and we talked about Wentz and his thoughts on him. But I want to hear something for you to hear something he said, and then for you to comment on it, because it kind of goes down with something that you just brought up. Take a listen.
What's going on here is the Eagles, because they had a new coach, they had more training camps, they're further ahead than other teams because of the new coaching rules, where you can have, a couple more mini camps, you can have a couple extra practice time, especially with the way that the NFL is now in terms of how you have to, the limited amount of practices. That gives them advantage, and also gives the Eagles an advantage, the fact that there's not a lot of film on what they're doing with the new coach.
All right, so you can chime in on that because I'm thinking really a May practice OTAs where he wasn't even really a big factor because you had you had Daniels there. I guess Bradford wasn't there at that time when they get that extra week because of the new coach, but I think that's a stretch.
Yeah, I think that's a big stretch. I mean, you think about, as you mentioned, it's one extra little mini camp. Obviously, you can't have pads on it, and it's the indications of Pete Carroll, coaches like that, and John Harbaugh who get fined for putting pads on guys or contact. You talk to coaches around this league, they don't think the off-season work is of much value because you're not allowed to put pads on guys. And Schwartz has flat out told me that you don't know anything until you get pads on these guys. So the fact that they had a little bit of a head start, hey, that's why they give it to rookie coaches or first-year coaches, because they need a little extra time to prepare. But to assume that's the reason for success, look at all the other first-year coaches since the new CBA. They don't all start like Doug Peterson because they had an extra mini camp that veteran coaches don't have. So, yeah, I think that's a bit of a stretch.
All right. I kind of agree. You'll hear that full interview coming up at 5:30 tonight. All right. Give us, because Lane Johnson's going to be gone. What are you seeing on the tape, Lane Johnson? And, is he playing at a level that it's going to be a noticeable drop-off?
Yeah, he is. He's been, if not the best right tackle in football, he's been one of the best two or three. And I would say of the biggest surprise is obviously on offense. It starts with Wentz, but after that, I say the biggest surprise to me has been the play of that offensive line. It's been one of the best in football, one of the best two or three offensive lines in football. And one of the reasons why is Lane Johnson, and one of the other reasons why is Alan Barber, who has come out of nowhere to be one of the best guards in football. And all of a sudden, because of the suspension, and we think it's going to come down before the Detroit game after the bye, so Lane's going to be gone, you affect both of those positions because Allen's got to kick out the right tackle, and I think he'll hold down the fort. I think he'll do pretty well, but he's not going to be as good as Lane at that particular position. And the domino effect from there is that Stefan Wisniewski is going to play at left guard, and I think he'll be fine. I think he'll hold down the fort, but he's not going to be as good as Allen was at that position. So it is going to affect them, and we'll just have to see how much, but it's one of those first little cracks you can see that could be a potential problem down the line because Lane Johnson's one of the Eagles' best five players, and I don't think a lot of people realize that because of the position he plays. It doesn't get a lot of notoriety, obviously, but he's really, really good. And when you lose a player like that for 10 games, it's going to hurt you.
Last guy that we're going to take a look at is Jason Peters because, he looked like he was on the downswing. He was constantly hurt. But how has this offense changed what Peters brings to this offensive line?
He is on the downside. He's not the player he once was. And if you look at it, he's been their fourth or fifth best offensive lineman. What does that tell you? When we talk about a guy who's a borderline Hall of Famer. And part of it is the age, part of it is the injuries. He's still been okay in pass protection. He's having more of an issue in run blocking. And that used to be where he just dominated people when he was completely healthy. But I always say every single practice the Eagles have, Jason's got to spend about 10, 15 minutes stretching his body out just to get it right so he can practice. So clearly he's at the stage of his career where it's a chore to even get on the practice field. And he's still better than any other option they could throw out there at left tackle. But I think if you're going to be honest, we've seen the best of Jason Peters. It's not going to get back to where it was when he was a consistent all-pro player.
All right. And you look at, there's got to be some bad in the game, right? There's got to be something they did wrong. There's got to be something
in the
that
Steelers game?
Yeah.
There wasn't. I guess the drops are still there. This week it was Trey Burton. Could you imagine how effective that offense would have been through the first 3 weeks if you didn't have those drops? And it was Jordan Matthews at one point, Nelson Aguilar, DGB dropped a couple potential touchdown. Imagine if they had lights-out receivers catching the football, how good it would have been offensively. So if I look at the one thing, it's that the drops are not only still there, they're consistent from week to week.
John also covers the league nationally for todayspigskin.com. Give John a follow at JF McMullen. Let's take a look at some of the things John's talking about nationally. We learned last night, breaking news, J.J. Watt probably done at least till week 12, but could be done for the year. And as you write at today's Pigskin, John, you think the Texans failed J.J. Watt.
Yeah, I do. And that's kind of tough on him, and I understand because of J.J.'s mentality. I mean, he would have fought him. He had never missed a game. But he had back surgery on July 21st, I believe was the date. July 21st, getting back surgery on a herniated disc, and he was back for week 1 on September 11th. So even if you want to give the Texans the benefit of the doubt, and they say Watt was pushing so hard, we wanted to let him get out there, once you watched him play, remember, this is the best defensive player in the league, 3-time defensive player of the year, a generational talent, Hall of Fame talent. This guy has never not dominated in his entire NFL career, and all of a sudden he shows up in week 1, he looks like an average player. So from that point, the Texans got to know he's not right. He's not 100%. And at that point, they got to go to him and they got to say, look, you got to get healthy. You got to get right, or you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to hurt the team. And sure enough, week 3 against New England, he hurts the back again. It's probably going to be another surgery. And it wouldn't surprise me if he's done for the season. That's still to be determined. But I think the Texans had to put their foot down and say, look, you got to be 100% before you get on the field. And even from a strategy standpoint, Mike, isn't it better to have him for the second half of the season than the first half of the season?
There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. And this goes to, you wonder how much fight that the player had. Like, did he talk them into play and they weren't able to stand up to player?
Well, I'm sure he did. And that's the part because, I mean, the guy has never missed an NFL game. He didn't want to. He said that the day he got out of back surgery, he said he wanted to be back for week 1. So that was his mentality, and you do have to fight him. But at some point, as I said, I mean, you're the organization. You're Bill O'Brien. You're the head coach, Romeo Crennel, the defensive coordinator. You got to put your foot down for the sake of the player as well as the team and say, hey, it's great that you're working this hard, but you got to be 100%. That's just part of the job of being a head coach and a defensive coordinator in this league.
John, a couple other things. Des Bryant, hairline fracture of his kneecap. The Cowboys are hopeful. Is this another situation, though, where the Cowboys should be cautious with their star receiver?
Well, they should, and it's a very similar situation to Zach Ertz here. They're using the same nomenclature day to day, week to week. That's nonsense. He's not playing this week. I mean, come on. But I mean, it's the same thing with Zach with the displaced rib, and you say, oh, he might play this week. No, he's not. And the same with Dez. I mean, I don't have a ton of respect for the Cowboys organization, obviously with Jerry Jones, Dr. Jones in these types of situations, but even he's not that obtuse to put him on the field that quickly. And a lot of it has to do with trying to get a competitive advantage and trying to let your opponent, hey, Dez might be out there, but nobody's that dumb that they don't realize when a guy's hurt. So I don't know why NFL teams have kind of shifted towards this sort of hockey mentality, upper body injury, lower body injury, where they don't give you the information because – you know what? Then as reporters, we just go to the doctors and they tell us the real story, and we get the story just in a different way.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how that goes. I guess they're hoping that he plays. I don't know who the Cowboys play this week, but I guess they're hoping that he plays in that game.
Yeah, he's not playing.
Well,
and it would be silly to play him. As you mentioned, this is an organization that pushed him back on the field last season too quickly. He wasn't the same player with the Jones fracture. And they did the same thing with Tony Romo, obviously, and he had a second clavicle break. So if they didn't learn from that, I would just be shaking my head.
Well, it is the Cowboys. You said it. Mike Gill, John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com here on the Sports Bash 97.3. We'll have more tomorrow on the Thursday night game and week number 4 coming up in the NFL. We'll have more news and notes. Don't forget, follow John at JF McMullen. And right here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, John.
Hey, thanks, Mike.